MCE crew, there was this movie that came out in the 1990s called Surviving the Game. It starred Gary Busey, Ice-T, some other people you may recognize, but I think it's the perfect allegory for what is going on in our economy today, okay? The purpose of the movie, and look, I'm going to give you spoilers. It's been like 30 years. You've got a guy, the principal character in the movie was Ice-T, and he was basically being hunted by this group of guys who had him in a situation under false pretenses. And he didn't know until the last minute that he was being hunted. And when that revelation occurred to him, he had to do any and everything that he could to survive, to get away from these people that were hunting him. Otherwise, he would be done away with. So that's the perfect allegory for what's going on in our economy today. You're being lied to. You're being actually hunted by the powers that be because they want you in a dependent position where all you are is a conspicuous consumer, and you're not out there acquiring assets that are going to free you and make you economically independent. Don't fall for that, okay? The purpose of this channel is to educate people and to get them into a situation where they are achieving financial independence. Just like in that movie, ultimately Ice-T achieved victory. We're after victory. And in order to do that, we got to recognize the forces that are arrayed against us. And believe me, they are. It is not paranoia if they're really out to get you. The government, federal, state, and local, is actively attempting to keep you, to prevent you from achieving financial independence. Now, I know that may come as a shock, but you need to understand who the enemy is. And yes, I did say enemy, because when it comes to your financial independence and your economic knowledge, the government, with their cohort, the media, is really working hard to keep you in the dark. Now, I love this country. I am very suspicious with regard to the government. Those are two different things, okay? So let's just establish that. MCE crew, I hope your day is progressing profitably. You stick around for the end of this video and we're going to show you exactly what the government is doing to prevent you from achieving financial independence and what you can do to circumvent their plans. You don't want to be a part of this dependency class that the government is actively trying to develop, working very hard to have more and more people rely solely on the government. And if people get trapped into that paradigm, they're never going to be able to realize their full potential in life. They are never going to be able to create generational wealth and lift their progeny out of poverty and keep them out of it, okay? Now, this plan, economic dependency, is reserved for the middle class and the poor. In fact, more and more is occurring every day to move the middle class into the poverty category. So let's get started and talk about that. First, we're going to talk about how the government is not accurately counting the unemployment numbers. And the reason that's happening is because they're trying very hard to make the employment situation look rosier than it is. Okay, so we're going to be looking at shadow stats, John Williams shadow stats. I'm going to link to all of this. You can do your own research. The Bureau of Labor Statistics acknowledges continuing misclassification of some, quote, unemployed, unquote, persons as, quote, employed, unquote. So you see what they're doing? They're coming out and they're saying, hey, you know what? These numbers, don't rely on them because we are having difficulty for whatever reason, planned or unplanned. We're having difficulty distinguishing between the unemployed and the employed, okay? So they're actually taking people who are unemployed and classifying them as employed. This is what the government is saying. Okay, in their household survey, they do this survey to determine who is employed and who is unemployed. The count of the understated unemployed had an upside limit of 336,000 persons in June 2021 against a 478,000 person limit in May of 2021, 558,000 in April, and 636,000 in March. The difference would be a potential headline U3 or unemployment rate of 6.1% in June instead of today's 5.9%. So the government is out there with the help of the media who does not do its job. And the government is out there saying, yeah, we're below 6% and crowing about it. Okay, this is artificially pumping up stocks and making the situation look a lot more rosy than it is. Meanwhile, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are going to lose the unemployment benefit. Okay, we talked about in the last video that we're over 6 million jobs shy of being where we were prior to the shutdowns and the big spike in unemployment that happened there. So all of this rhetoric that's out there talking about, well, you know, jobs are plentiful, this, that, and the other. Okay, yeah, well, there are some jobs out there. But if you lost a $60,000 a year job and, you know, McDonald's or your local grocery store is hiring at, you know, $15 an hour, that's not going to cut it. You're still looking at, what am I trying to say here? You're still looking at potential foreclosure, potential repossession, default on all kinds of debt obligations because your salary has not come back to match what you lost. Now, there are just over 6 million people still in that boat. We are replacing jobs. We're not creating jobs, okay? You have people coming back into the workforce. Again, I stress, we are 6 million shy of the number that we were before this whole thing began. So that's one glaring example of how the government is actively out there fudging these numbers. Now, they've never reported an issue, to my knowledge, in being able to accurately count these numbers before. But today, when so much in the economy hinges on whether or not employment is coming back, whether or not inflation is being accurately accounted for, we're getting a lot of fuzzy math going on. Okay, this next part is really, really troubling. Fully adjusted for disruptions caused by you know what, based on BLS side surveys of impact studies dealing with you know what, and with roughly 6.3 million people missing from the headline U.S. labor force, actual headline unemployment still should be well around 10%, the highest unemployment rate since before World War II. Now, what happened? What was going on in the world just before World War II? The Great Depression. So if they were being accurate about these numbers, and you better believe they're getting pressure not to come out with the full story, and the media is not demanding it. The media is accepting whatever these guys are giving them because they want to make the picture look rosy for political reasons and to keep the stock market propped up. This is a consumer economy, and if the 10.16 unemployment rate were to be reported in the news, that would knock the bottom out of the stock market, which is not a bad thing. It gives you an opportunity to buy in when assets, equities in particular, become less expensive. Okay, let's now move on and talk about inflation. We talk about it a lot, but we have to. We've got to talk about inflation because that conspires to make your money worth less. And there are things that you need to do, and if you watch the channel, you know about some of those things. We'll speak about a few of them in a minute. But the government, the U.S. federal government, has changed the definition for inflation several times throughout the last few decades, okay? They seem to change the definition when it's convenient for them, when they want to manipulate numbers and, again, make a situation look more positive than it really is. So if we go by the inflation definition from 1980, then inflation would be 13%. If we took the definition from 1990, it would be 9%. We're saying right now that it's 5%, just over 5%. And that, if we use those other definitions, is actually more than double, okay, at the highest level if we use the 1980 definition. So This is really troubling because that being the case, it would mean that under a definition that the government used to classify inflation in the past, that would mean that you would have to get well above 13% return on your investment in order to beat inflation, okay? And we've seen sectors of the economy just wildly explode with regard to price inflation. Take the medical insurance and the cost of medical equipment and procedures as one prime example of that. And that's a real world hit because we can avoid getting health care, but we do so to our detriment. And it ends up, ultimately robbing us of our most valuable non-renewable resource, which is our time, okay, on this earth. So they are out to get you, okay? Now, the last thing that I want to talk to you about with regard to this whole situation is something that I've mentioned before in terms of how this whole thing is arranged such that the purpose of it is to put you in a dependent class. You have this debate, and we talked about it extensively in a previous video. You have this debate ongoing about whether critical race theory should be taught in public schools. And you have never seen the type of fervor around an educational issue like you've seen about this. You have never seen teachers and the teachers' unions getting in front of the media, and some of them are absolutely apoplectic about teaching critical race theory. You have never seen them get together and form a union to demand that we have economic literacy taught as a national curriculum, okay? You've never seen that, and you never will, because the design is not to have children come out of school and be able to be economically productive adults anymore. This entire new paradigm is trying to shift people into a dependent class. What you need to do is you need to first recognize what's going on, and second, you need to, if you have any entrepreneurial leanings, you need to go ahead and do some research and get your business established. If you have a business, then bravo, okay? That's great. You don't want to be someone who sits on the sidelines and just, acts like a piece of flotsam and jetsam in this new economy, in the ocean of this new economy. We're going to talk about universal basic income in an upcoming video. This is another classic example of how we're moving in the direction of this specific dependency paradigm, okay? And when you are dependent on government, you will do what they say, when they say it, and if you complain about it, then you may notice that your benefits are interrupted. And if you think that's not the case, then take a look at what's occurring right now in parts in China with the social credit score, okay? So you've got to be economically astute. You've got to be financially independent. There is no longer a choice in the matter. If you can't get that done, if you do not see the value in doing that, you're going to resign yourself and you're going to resign your family to government dependency, okay? And that's going to look very bleak, more and more bleak as time goes on. If you want to establish a business, get out there and do so. Buy assets, okay? Buy inflation-proof assets, okay? Do your due diligence. Make sure the moves you're making are good for your financial position. Don't just trust me. I'll have links in the description. You need to do your due diligence. You need to do copious amounts of research to understand what's going on, okay? I'll talk to you soon.